You're listening to 5 Things with Lisa Birnbach.
Hi, it's Lisa Birnbach. Is there anything that we can learn from the Jeffrey Epstein story? I cannot stop thinking about it. I cannot stop thinking about the dreadfulness and awfulness of what he did and who he was, how he conned the world into thinking he was some great philanthropist and some great mind, how he was requiring sexual release 3 times a day, how the cover-up, it's a mess. It's disgusting. It's America at our worst, and I can't stop thinking about it. And when we were on Martha's Vineyard over the weekend, guess what? His lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, he was not 3 feet from us, walking up and down the beach, up and down the beach, up and down the beach. I wanted to throw sand at him, but that's for cowards. Anyway, what a mess we're in. So it's really extra important that I celebrate the 5 things that made my life better this week because I need them. Maybe you do too. Okay, here we go. Oh, before we go, our guest today is Erica Jong. Erica Jong! She's coming into the studio momentarily. I can't wait to talk to her. And now, my 5 things. Number 1, eating outdoors. When it's not pouring or excruciatingly hot, it's so much nicer to sit outside, especially if you go out to dinner. And as noisy as New York streets usually are, it's almost always quieter than the restaurants themselves. Number 2, the knowledge, just the knowledge of, and the anticipation for the Downton Abbey movie, right? Are you with me? It's keeping me going. It's keeping me going. All I had to do was see the trailer for that, and I just felt better. It's like Robert Mueller, but something to feel good about and not worry about. So Downton Abbey is coming, and that's number 2. Number 3 is the lemon, the fruit. Lemon is the perfect seasoning for anything. I love it. I love it on chicken, on pasta, on roasted potatoes, on melon, on blueberries. You know, it's just lemon. It's fresh. It's good. Fresher is better, but it has seeds, and the bottle of lemon juice is good too. And I realize I depend on it. Number 4, the documentary called Knock Down the House. I saw it last night. It is a documentary directed by Rachel Lears, which follows 4 political races waged by women who came from outside the system to represent working-class people. Not one of them had a chance in hell. Not Amy Vilela, not Cori Bush, not Paula Jean Swearingen, not Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Watching the unexpected victory of AOC is thrilling in this movie. No one was more surprised than she, but watching the losses of the others was as emotional too, and crushing. It's a film with highs and lows, and most interesting is the low-tech opportunities to enter politics from small-town America. No matter your party, your affiliation, your bias, this is a film about humanity, and it's on Netflix. And number 5, when comedian John Mulaney praises something or someone as funny and brilliant, I pay attention. And that is how I discovered number 5, the comedian Jacqueline Novak's one-woman show, Get on Your Knees. With the most extraordinary uses of language, the show is essentially about sex, the oral kind. I'm going to urge my guest today, Erica Jong, to see it, and all of you if you can. Jacqueline Novak does an hour or so about oral sex, but she talks about great books and her youth in Chappaqua, New York, and her love of the paranormal. After a sold-out run at the Cherry Lane Theater, it is moving to the Lucille Lortel for at least another month. She is breathtaking. Erica Jong has been not only at the forefront of feminist literature since the 1970s, she is still one of its most prominent voices. A poet, a novelist, an essayist, she has been chronicling her life and times in the most sensuous and what the kids call sex-positive of ways. From Fear of Flying, published in 1973, to Fear of Dying, published in 2015, Erica creates fully formed, realistic plots and characters who take life by its throat. Welcome, Erica. Erica, it's so wonderful to see you in person. I haven't seen you in a while, and I feel so connected to you, not just because I've been reading Fear of Dying and The World Began with Yes, but because I also follow you constantly on social media. As
Twitter.
You do me.
I love Twitter. But
I do too.
My daughter is a star of Twitter.
She has actually become the breakout star on the East Coast of Twitter. Your
Absolutely.
daughter, Molly Jong Fast.
Molly Jong Fast is going to turn 41 this year.
That's it?
Yes.
That's amazing.
And she published 3 novels in her early 20s, and at Random House, Taka, as my grandmother would say. And everybody jumped on her in a really mean way, and they said, if she weren't Erica Jong's daughter, blah, blah, blah. All
Right.
the young women. And she was very sad about that. And I said, it's because you're my daughter. But of course, she only half believed me.
Mm-hmm.
She had 3 kids. She always wanted kids young because she's an only child.
Right.
Only children want 3 children, right? They were lonely. So she immediately had 3 kids. And her husband, who was a professor of Elizabethan literature, said, Erica, we have 3 kids. I'm going into the investment business, which was his father's breakthrough. His father had a firm called Alternate Investment Group, and he created his own firm called Rethink Education. Since he had been a Yale PhD, since he had taught in colleges, it worked. He wouldn't go into his father's firm. He was too rebellious. But he's so lovely. He's such a good guy.
Your stories, both real and fictional, have are so inspiring because there's great joy at the end of them.
Oh, I'm
Molly,
such a lucky person.
You are lucky, but also you've done so much with it. I mean, Molly, who is very open about it, had an addiction problem when she was very young. Very young. You had to deal with the heartbreak of sending your daughter to rehab when she was a kid. And she got all that done. And she's an incredible mother.
Incredible.
She's an incredible political voice.
Right.
Hilarious and political.
And funny.
And funny. She's writing for the new Playboy. She's happily
a
married.
contributing editor of the new Playboy. And we went out there to L.A. and she did my second Playboy interview. My first was in 1974, right?
Right.
So she did the update on the Playboy interview. It was hilarious and wonderful.
I bet.
And
you have a great relationship with one another, which is every mother's dream, and with your grandchildren.
We worked very hard on that relationship, I have to tell you. It was not easy. I mean, we went through all the mother-daughter stuff, but we were determined.
If you both approach that relationship with the same desire to make it work, it can work. I tell myself.
There are times when, there are times when we arrived in L.A. and I said, "What? We're not sharing a room?" She said, this was for the Playboy thing.
Right.
She said, "Mommy, I'm grown up. I have my own room. You have your own room." I said, "Okay, but this Sunday is Mother's Day. Can we have breakfast?" And she said, "Okay." Now, she has gazillions of friends in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
She loves the program in L.A., and she knows everyone in L.A. through the program or her work. Mm-hmm. So I was like second choice or third, but I said, Mother's Day brunch, okay, we'll do that. And the rest of the time I called my friends and she called hers.
Yeah, and you had a great time.
We had a great time.
And you have great relationships with her kids, individual relationships, which is great. You don't know this, I don't think, but I just became I can't
great
say,
grandmother?
No, not a great one, just a regular old one. My son and his wife had a baby 3 months ago. So, and the weird thing is, his middle name is Leo.
Where does he live?
He now lives in Beverly Hills.
Okay. Well, that's okay. That's an easy flight.
It's an easy flight. It's not
a
as
nonstop.
Yeah, but it would have been nice if they'd stayed in New York for a year or so.
Well, you know what people say about grandchildren. Should have had them first.
Right. Well, so far, he's a bore. He just eats and sleeps. So I don't care yet.
And his name is?
Simon Leo.
Oh, how wonderful.
And I'm looking forward to getting to know him eventually. But I'm very happy. I'm very happy about him, and he's adorable, and like all babies. And
when you have a grandchild, that's when you start worrying about Trump and nuclear weapons.
Oh, I started that a long time ago. I didn't need this.
He has no idea about nuclear weapons. He says, why do we have them if we can't use them?
He thinks they're toys.
Yes.
But he also has never read the Constitution.
Oh, right. Of course. Well, that's a small fact. But he said to somebody when he was running, we have all these nuclear weapons. Why can't we use them? Duh. I was in Europe when Chernobyl happened.
Oh, wow.
And I know a little boy from England who got thyroid cancer after Chernobyl. So I'm aware through my own experiences that radiation was everywhere in Europe, right?
Right.
I could be radiated right now. I was in Italy, my favorite country, but there were clouds of radiation going over Europe.
Right. And just because you couldn't see them doesn't mean they weren't there.
Right.
When you think about Trump and you write about Trump and react to government decisions of all kinds, do you ever think of moving to Italy? Actually, I know you don't want to be away from Molly and the family, but do you ever think that all of you might want to move?
I think all the time of moving to Venice, which I know so well. I think also of moving to Montreal because my husband is fluent in French and loves speaking French. I'm fluent in Italian and I love speaking Italian. So those are the two things. But Ken always says to me, darling, I'd love to be in Montreal. Good food, people who speak French, not as boring as Toronto, which is boring, I can tell you. Clean, lovely. Margaret Atwood, my old friend, is there. Many wonderful writers and filmmakers are there, but boring.
So what's plan B?
My husband says, you will never move to a city where your grandchildren are not.
Right.
And it's true.
Right.
You know, I want to see them grow up.
Right.
And they're growing so fast that, I mean, you can barely catch up.
Perhaps they'll think of going to university in another country. And then that might open the door. But let's talk.
Max has studied ancient Greek in Florence. So he's a little language genius.
Oh, wow.
Ancient Greek, Hebrew,
wow,
Mandarin. He's like a kid who has a real affinity for language. So
he'll end up somewhere where he can use those skills and gifts.
Well, ancient Greek is a little tough.
No, but you can. Yeah, that's true. I don't. Well, you could probably. If he could learn ancient Greek in Italian, he could do anything.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's talk about Isadora Wing and Vanessa Wonderman. Isadora Wing was the heroine of Fear of Flying. which was the first important feminist novel, which allowed a woman of intelligence, of education, of sophistication to really love sex and to be comfortable in her body. It was a revelation, your novel, as you know, and kind of changed the landscape for
female desire.
Yes.
And talking about female desire has always been suppressed. They could express male desire.
Right.
Female desire has always been suppressed.
And taboo.
And taboo.
In every culture.
Yeah, and
Most
even
likely.
Doris Lessing, who in the Golden Notebook wrote, "I don't like the smell of my own menstrual blood." And that was a beginning for me. I mean, but pleasure, she didn't really write about. She did say, "I can't reach an orgasm if I'm not in love with the man." Mm-hmm. That was a beginning. But she didn't really get into women's desire.
And when you turned in the manuscript to Fear of Flying,
Yeah.
were there editors who were uncomfortable or nervous or thought it would not sell or were hesitant to release it?
Well, the first agent who read it, I could name her, but I'm a nice person. Lynn Nesbitt.
Oh,
Said, "This book will never sell. I won't represent it." But when it went to Holt Reinhardt, Aaron Asher was my editor. Aaron was Philip Roth's editor. He was Saul Bellows' editor. He was not a prude. And Aaron said, well, there's a story about Aaron, which is kind of interesting. I turned in my first written novel to him. It was called The Man Who Murdered Poets. Huh. It was very well written. It was an homage to Nabokov. My narrator was male. He wanted to go and kill the most famous poet of his generation, like Robert Lowell or somebody, to take on his poetic powers. Aaron read it. He said, "It's beautifully written. I won't publish it." And I said, "If it's beautifully written, why won't you?" He said, "Go down the street to Farrar Straus. They'll publish it. I won't." And I said, "If you think it's so good, why won't you?" He said, "Erica, you have to go home and write a novel in the voice of those amazing poems."
Wow.
And I have to tell you that at that moment, I put The Man Who Murdered Poets on a shelf. I never looked at it again. I knew Aaron was right. You know how sometimes that was a blessing in my life, a real blessing, because at that time, women wrote books about men. And Aaron said, "Why do you write books about men?" And I said, "Because they get all the reviews, and we don't." And he said, "But your poetry is something new. Write a novel in that voice."
He's so right. And you did.
And I put aside that book without a thought.
Isn't that amazing? You knew he was right.
I knew
it clicked.
It clicked. I knew he was right. So if I count my blessings, Aaron Asher is one of my blessings.
Wow. I love that story. And I love the idea that a man urged you to go forward with this voice. And
he was really extraordinary, Aaron. There are no editors like him today. Really. I can tell you, who really read, who don't say, "Does she have a television show?"
How big is her social media following?
Right.
You know, they ask that now.
I know.
It's insulting. The publishing business
has changed
so much.
Yeah.
And it really is for people who don't like to read.
Yeah.
And reading is what do they call it? A bug, not the design, or it's a flaw, not the rule.
It's crazy. When we were younger, I know you're younger than me, but when we were younger, Gore Vidal and Updike were on the bestseller list, right?
All the time.
Literate writers were on the bestseller list.
That's right. It was literature. Now what you see on bestseller lists is often...
Nora Roberts.
Yeah. It's the 10-day diet, the 4-day diet.
It's chick lit.
Yeah.
Which the publishers began to hardcover. At a certain point in time. They basically took the genre stuff, romance. Some romance is good. I'm not against it. When I was president of the Authors Guild, I tried to recruit romance writers to be part of us. I'm not a snob about romance. Some of it can be well written. But basically, they hardcovered the genre books because they thought they'd sell better. And that brought the whole level down.
Well, it's the lonely exceptional book that cuts through the noise and also the 24-hour cycle of news that is impenetrable.
That doesn't interview writers.
No, it doesn't interview
unless
writers.
They're political. If right now, in the Trump revolution and revolution against Trump, they will interview you if you write a book like Joy-Ann Reid's book, The Man Who Sold America. And I'm a great fan of Joy-Ann Reid. I think she's brilliant. Mm-hmm. And I think her writing is interesting, too, although not literary. You know, she's a journalist on TV and a very, very good one. I have no complaints about Joy.
There are tons of books that have been coming out since 2017 that are all Trump-related. They do sell well, whether it's Michael Wolff, whether it's probably Omarosa's book sold well about Trump. I mean, it's
We're hungry to know about how this moron got so much power.
He got. My big question is, how did the Republicans who once disdained him, how did they become such suck-ups? How did Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell become his...
Rick Wilson knows all.
Oh, yes.
There's a whole tribe of Republicans. They support my daughter, by the way, who is...
They show up at her parties that she has invited me to, and...
you have to go to her salon. She has the best political salon in New York.
Oh, I know that. I mean, I've heard about them.
You have to go. It's great fun.
Can I be your plus one?
Please.
Okay.
Next time there's an invitation, I will take you as my plus one because Ken doesn't want to go.
Well, I'll tell you something. This age of Molly's age is so interesting because this is the moment where Democrats are following Republicans. Republicans are following Democrats because of the tremendous impact and damage of Trump. Parties don't matter anymore.
Right.
I mean, George Conway, he's kind of heroic. I don't understand how his marriage works. Do you?
I don't know. I'm very interested in knowing how they get on.
Me too.
But Kellyanne makes a lot of money.
Yes.
And George doesn't have to.
Right.
And maybe that's it. You know, I have been with men where I was the breadwinner. And it's a different dynamic. I mean, I've been married 4 times, so I've known every dynamic.
Would you please tell our listeners, speaking of which, about the prenup with your husband Ken and what you did to it when you did it?
Well, Ken proposed to me after he met my mother, which I am writing about in my autobiography. He said he met my mother. He met my father. They had a very Hamish Jewish humor connection. They loved each other. And then he went in and saw my mother, and my mother gave him the evil eye. What, another guy? Right. That was...
How soon between husband 3 was this?
I had been single for a decade.
Oh.
And I had gone out with everybody you can name. People who wanted me because they thought I was rich, people who wanted me.
No,
they don't
you were
understand.
Erica Jong, of
They
course.
don't understand that writers are never rich. But anyway, they wanted me because I was an icon, or maybe they'd never read anything of mine. Who knows? I went out with everybody, and I was completely convinced I would never marry again. They were all nice, but not to marry.
Right.
Okay? Some were good at sex, some were good at conversation, and I formed the theory that you needed 3 men. You needed one man to fuck your brains out. You needed another man to have great conversations with. He could even be gay.
Mm-hmm.
And you needed a third man who was very supportive and loving and best friend. Could be gay, could be straight.
Right.
And if you had those 3 men, you were fine.
Right.
Okay. So when I met Ken, I had been single for almost a decade, and I didn't really want to get married again. And we were driving away from my parents' house in Saugatuck in Westport. And Ken stopped the car, and he said, I knew I was in love with you. I knew I wanted to spend my life with you, but I couldn't figure out why you would need me. I met your mother. You need me.
That is a beautiful proposal.
Because my mother was so critical, so difficult. She was a painter, a realistic painter who didn't get famous because the timing was wrong. Her best friend from art school, Lee Krasner, got famous.
That could be a problem.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. My mother was brilliant. I mean, my mother only made 7-letter words in Scrabble.
Incredible.
I mean, she could write sonnets. There was nothing she couldn't do. But when I got famous, she said to me, when I read your novels, I feel I am reading my obituary. When I read your poetry, I know you're a great poet.
Uh-huh.
That was my mother.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. And my mother
gives a little, takes a little.
Right.
Yeah.
And my mother could write good poetry, I have to tell you. Okay. So after Ken said, I know you need me, he said, will you marry me? And I said, yes. And he said, yes. And then we drove home in silence to my house in Weston, which I still have, and I'm trying to sell because it doesn't work for our life anymore. But anyway, so we get home to my house, and we've pledged
Right.
to each other. We're there. And I look at him, he looks at me, and we don't take it back. And 4 months later, we got married in Vermont at his country place, and we were married by a female justice of the peace in Warren, Vermont, and he said the Harayat in Hebrew, which is, I mean, for your listeners who are not Jewish, it's really saying, I take you as my woman, I will take care of you, you will take care of me, etc., in Hebrew. And in Warren, Vermont, there weren't a lot of people who knew Hebrew. But the people who knew it knew what it meant, which is
It's so touching.
you take a woman, you give her something of value, and she's your bride.
That's a nice story. What about the prenup, Erica? Tell the story of...
Well, at that...
Wasn't there the statement
He's a lawyer.
about...
He's a
lawyer.
divorce lawyer.
Right. Didn't you say this is the triumph of hope over reality or something? Yeah.
No, hope over experience.
Yeah, over experience.
I sent out Triumph of Hope Over Experience, which I think is a line of Samuel Johnson or some 18th century person I studied.
Mm-hmm.
Triumph of, I think it's Samuel Johnson. I can't remember. You know, my degree is in 18th century.
Erica is a Barnard girl. We're very
No, but I went to Columbia
proud.
Graduate School.
Right,
And
true.
I now have a PhD honoris causa.
Oh, you're Dr. Jong.
I'm Dr. Jong because my darling son-in-law got me a degree. Okay, from SUNY. Okay.
Doesn't matter.
Anyway.
It's beautiful.
Anyway, I'm a doctor, for what it's worth.
Well, let me just ask you about this thing on my neck. No. So
I love that.
Well, anyway, Erica and Ken tore up their prenup.
Well, what we did was I said to him, look, I don't believe in marriage, but I love you and I'm going to marry you, but we need a prenup. And he said, okay, we'll get a different lawyer who will write a prenup. And we hired a different lawyer. He's a divorce lawyer. I didn't want him writing it.
Right.
Very suspicious.
Yes.
I was.
Of course.
And then
Wouldn't be.
I had been married, and my first husband went crazy. My second husband, I adored Alan Jong, but he had no sense of humor.
Problem.
My third husband freaked out when we had Molly, wasn't ready to give up being the baby. You know, I went through everything.
Right.
Okay. And so I said, Ken, we need a prenup. And he said, no problem, prenup, whatever you want, you can have. And 10 years later, we burned the prenup in a wok.
I love that. That's so traditional of
Right.
you. You are such a copycat.
And who were the witnesses?
Who?
Woody and Soon-Yi.
Ah! Really?
I swear. And
I would have liked to have been a fly on that wall.
and then who else? Many.
So it was a big event,
Huge.
a catered event.
It
Did people eat bits of wok fried prenup?
No. There was, and also Arthur Miller and Inga Morath.
Oh, my.
And it was a star-studded group, right? Sadly, Arthur and Inga are both gone. I adored them. But all those people are gone. Not Woody and Soon-Yi, although Woody's been having a very tough time. And
That's a discussion for another day.
right.
Before I continue our conversation with Erica Jong, I want to tell you about our sponsor, The Field TV. The Field is a boutique advertising agency and production company that knows how to sell things. They create content that entertains, explains, and informs their audience about the benefits and virtues of their clients' products and services. I know this because I've been working with them on and off for the past 6 years as a storyteller and a consultant. They even produce this podcast for me. Do you have something to sell? Want to grow your company? Check out their website at thefieldtv.com or give them a call at 212-253-2888. And now, back to our discussion with Erica Jong. Let me talk about The World Began with Yes, your most recent book of poetry. I knew you first as a poet, actually. I don't know if other in the world know that. I was wondering if you would read Poetry is Better Than Xanax. I love this.
Oh, God. Let's see. Poetry is better than Xanax. You want to live a life of poetry, even flying across the country in a plane called Virgin. You long for the clouds, the mute, staring moon, to talk to you in metaphor, reassuring you in this age of anarchy and mindless destruction of all will turn out to be the best in the end. I cannot promise that the sun will not explode or the moon not wither, but I promise that your poet's dreams are your flying carpet, past virginity, mortality, despair. So hold on while your hair catches fire and fly without fear. I learned this trick.
Incredible. I just got shivers. Thank you so much.
Well, you know, it's funny. I regard writing as my meditation. People that say to me, why do you write so much? And I say, I can't not write because...
Why do you write so much?
Yeah.
Like that's something you should apologize
Yes.
for?
Yes.
Drop them. Those are not friends.
Yeah.
The thing that's so extraordinary, you wrote Fear of Dying in 2015. This book of poetry was published more recently, this year. They're so perfectly read together.
Yes.
There's so many themes that are interwoven.
My mother's death.
Your mother's death, which is something I know you've been unpacking for years in different ways. But also, yes, the openness to yes. I thought of Molly Bloom in your book.
Right.
I thought of Molly Bloom in the poems. Yes, yes, taking a chance, looking for adventure. That's what you represent to me, Erica, and it's such a gift to women.
Well, you know,
we're so scared always.
We're living through a very curious time. I mean, I have great empathy for the Me Too movement, but I've never been raped.
Well, one doesn't have to have been raped to have been.
But I did not. I had a grandfather who loved me and a father who loved me, and neither one of them went in my pants.
Yeah.
No, really. I mean, I have many friends who cannot say that. And in fact...
Is that right?
Yes.
Fathers and grandfathers?
Yes. I have one particular friend in L.A., and I won't mention her name because she's writing about the fact that her mother's brother, her uncle, molested her constantly, okay? So I know this is real. I would never deny it, but I did not have that experience. And I have to say, why? Because I liked men who liked words and music. I didn't want to be with a man who didn't like words and music. So I wouldn't go out with a guy just because he was a hunk. And every man I have been with, and I mean my first husband, my second husband, my third husband, and Ken, were interested in my pleasure. They were interested in foreplay. They were interested in my having an orgasm. I never had a man who wasn't.
But in between, in that decade, I'm sure there were men who thought, well, she likes sex, I'm going to show her. I mean, in a way, you pose a dare to some kind of creepy guy.
And I was never raped at that time in my life, because even though I went out with men who were imperfect, I never was raped because, and I don't know why, but I can tell you, because I'm too brainy. Men like that didn't like me. I can tell you the truth. You know, you go out with somebody who's talking about Saul Bellow and John Keats, they're not interested in raping you. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was literature that saved me.
Isn't that amazing?
I don't know.
Let's talk about Vanessa before we get to your 5 things, the protagonist of Fear of Dying, because she has everything except she's surrounded by death. Mm-hmm. She has reached a kind of complacent moment with her husband, mm-hmm. and wants to feel at her 60th birthday that she has vitality, and
right.
she's about to mess everything up.
Right. She wants sex so much, and he has had a heart condition, and he can't get an erection.
And I was so scared she was going to screw it up. I really was. I don't want to give it away. But talk about how you feel sexual desire in a 60-year-old is different from sexual desire in a 30-year-old, if you can. If you can't, no one can.
If you have a partner who enjoys your pleasure, even if he can't get an erection, he will find a way to make you come. And I know women will doubt that, but the fact of the matter is that a man who loves you is going to find a way to pleasure you.
But the idea of older bodies being sexual is something that we're not used to reading about, right? Because we're so superficial and we're so visual, and
look,
we're
it's
aware.
not going to be Donald Trump who likes old Playboy centerfolds, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wants a woman in a porn magazine or a porn movie. I never have met him. I wouldn't want to meet him. He's not my type. Okay? I had many friends who went to his parties. They came back and told me tons of blow. Tons of blow. He is not sober. Cocaine everywhere. Okay.
Wow.
I had many friends who went to his parties, okay? And he is not as advertised, clean and sober. All right, that's his thing. I know the difference. But he's so stupid, I couldn't go to bed with him.
Well,
I can't go to bed with a man who's dumb.
yeah.
I'm sure you can't.
No, it's not my favorite thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
But do you still get flack and pushback for loving sex and writing about sex? You can't anymore, right?
I have to tell you that my books are now in Arabic.
Okay, case closed.
Right. And a woman, a journalist from Egypt, is coming to meet me in September. She was the first Arabic reader to call me on the phone and say, "How did you get the nerve?" And my books are published in Mandarin. And they are perhaps more discreet. But even early on, Fear of Flying was amazing in Japan. People love. I mean, it's only lately that I'm published in Arabic and Mandarin, but when in the 70s, the Japanese readers discovered me, women readers. So, I mean, they're more open about sex in some ways and more closed about sex in other ways. Nudity doesn't bother them. They go to baths. They go to hot springs. So in a way, the Japanese are different, right, than we. And even older women go to hot springs, for God's sake.
And people get massages and people
and
do
it's
what
a
they have to
much
do.
less uptight culture about nudity. You go to Karuizara in the Alps under Mount Fuji, and people go down to the basement of the hotel and they take all their clothes off with two sexes involved. So maybe we're the most puritanical about bodies. The Japanese sure aren't.
Wow. What do you know?
They aren't. My father had a business in Japan, so I spent quite a lot of time in Japan. And we went to Mount Fuji one summer, and when we were in Japan forever. And people take off their clothes.
Now, I was in Tokyo just once, but I was in that wonderful hotel that was in Lost in Translation, the Hayato, Grand Hayato.
Right.
And there was a beautiful...
I love the name, Hayato.
Hayato. And there is a gorgeous pool on the roof. And the hotel gives you all kinds of robes and slippers and stuff to wear in the special elevator that goes to the pool.
To the spa, yeah.
And I got in the elevator, and there was a gentleman in the elevator, and he got off and decided he'd wait for the next one. He didn't want to take an elevator with a female. And he was not a Hasidic Jew. He was a Japanese businessman. So, I came away thinking, oh, they're even more prudish than we are. But you're saying they're not.
And if
Just
you
that
go
guy.
to Atami, which is the hot springs that Japanese honeymooners go to, Atami, everybody's naked.
What do you know? What do you know? Well, people have to be comfortable in their own skin.
In their own bodies.
And
they
in
really
their own
do.
body. And we
They
need...
do.
And I notice from fashion magazines that American publishers are fashion media publishing industrial complex is now showing real women in ads,
right?
Which is something to behold.
A few. It's like African American women are allowed to be buxom. Are white women allowed to be buxom? There's a kind of double standard going on that is ghastly, I think. Is it possible for a woman to show a breast sliced off?
Well,
there's something else. Many women have had breast cancer.
Yes.
And have not had reconstruction. When I see Vogue allowing a woman with one breast missing, then I'll say we've changed.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them, thank God, or goddess, but I have friends who have not had reconstruction and didn't want it and said, okay, I have one breast. I'll live with it. When the fashion magazines can shoot pictures of those women, I'll say we're different.
I gotcha.
Right now, we're in a kind of double thing. Black women are allowed to be Zoftic. White women are not. But we're not showing all the differences. We're not showing women who are, what's the word for it? LGBTQ. Mm-hmm. We're not showing women who grew up as girls and decided they wanted to be boys. We're not showing...
But a lot of models started out as men.
Right.
And are trans women.
Right.
That's interesting, isn't it? That there are trans women models, but not trans men models that I know of.
Exactly. So it's the same old thing. The men are allowed to become women. The women are not allowed to get masculine. So we still have a double standard.
Interesting.
I mean, I don't want to be mean about it because they're getting better about plumpness if you're a woman of color. And that's a good thing, definitely. But what about trans? What about people with disabilities? If having one breast is a disability, which I doubt that it is, mm-hmm. It's a choice. Mm-hmm. Most women have reconstruction because they don't want to be without. And I have a dear friend who had a double mastectomy and reproduction all at the same time. And that was what she wanted, and that's what she did. But not everybody wants to fit in that way. They want to flaunt it mm-hmm. and say, I am a survivor. And women ought to be allowed to do that also.
I once saw the comedian Tig Notaro do her live show. And after she had both breasts removed due to cancer, she said her breasts were so little and she kept making fun of them, so they fought back. And she would open her shirt at the end of her show and walk on the stage.
I think that's lovely.
It was really dramatic and wonderful.
And freeing.
And she's alive. And what's more important than that? It doesn't matter really what we look like. It matters that we are alive and healthy after all. And if you are flat-chested because of surgery, so be it. Who cares? Who cares?
It's somebody who really loves you. Doesn't care. Well, I have loved talking to you and seeing you in person. And Erica, it's time to hear what things make your life better. 5, and in your case, 6. So what?
You gave us 6. So, and that's fine because you're you. But let's start with number 1.
Writing is my meditation and keeps me from going mad. And really and truly, why do I write? Because if I didn't write, I'd be absolutely a basket case.
Yeah. How would you fit all your reactions and observations? What would you do with them? Exactly. Number 2.
My grandchildren remind me to be playful. My grandchildren, who are now, the youngest are 11 and a half twins, remind me that it's not that serious. right? That we're going to get through this horrible period in politics. Hopefully we'll get through it without bombs and radiation that kills everything.
And you see them a lot, right? Those grandchildren of yours?
Well, now they're in school until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So
that blows.
But we're going to Santa Fe. Molly and Matt and me and the 3 kids. We're going to Santa Fe next week.
Oh, cool.
So we're going to spend a week together. Ken doesn't want to go. Ken doesn't want to go because Ken is dealing with Parkinson's.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not know.
And last time when we went to Antigua, it was fine. We borrowed Ken and Barbara Follett's house in Antigua. They're really good friends of 40 years. And it was fine because they sent wheelchairs, but he doesn't have a tremor.
Right.
And he walks pretty well. But when you have to change planes, he gets nervous.
Yeah, I get it.
He doesn't have a lot of symptoms. He's so lucky. He walks well. I bought him a silver-handled cane. It's beautiful. All he needs is a top hat to go with it. But he's really feeling, I can't walk through museums. There's a great Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe that I adore. He's a little self-conscious, but he's going to work it through, I know.
I know he will. Which leads us to number 3.
Going to Italy reminds me I am allowed to be human. Why do I love Italy? It is the country that says a human being is a human being is a human being is not perfect. And that's what I love about Italy.
And Ken goes with you to Italy.
Yes.
And you go to Venice.
Right.
And you stay at the most gorgeous, divine hotel with the hugest swimming pool.
Only when I've sold a book.
Ah, I understand. That would have to. Yeah.
I took Bet there for 3 years in a row, and her brothers were furious. But Bet is my granddaughter, and Molly and I took her to the Cipriani because she's such a good traveler. The boys are not.
Okay, so
the boys are terrible travelers.
But they're good at other things.
But they're getting better at traveling. And I took Darwin on my German book tour.
And that was a good fit for him, right?
It was perfect. And I took Max to Rome when he was 6.
You're a good grandma.
And we stayed in the Hotel de Russie, and it had a little place where you could get burgers in the garden, and so he's had his Italy.
Number 4 is a surprise. I love it, though.
Never cooking allows me to find men who are good cooks, including my dear husband, Ken, who seems to have gone on strike.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, you don't cook at all?
Ken cooked his way through Julia Child when he was in college. He went to Brown, and he found that he could cook his way through Julia Child and learn to do everything. He was interested in that. Now, not so interested. We have a housekeeper. He's lost interest because he's adjusting to a chronic disease. Mm-hmm. But he will get back to it, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice that you don't have to cook. Number 5.
Oh, God. Buying designer clothes and living through the panic attacks of the charge bills reminds me that I will always be an Ashkenazic Jew. They are now trying to discover whether in our genes we remember all the Holocausts through which we have lived.
Seriously?
Yes.
Wow.
If you read Simon Schama's book, Jews of the Ancient World, you realize that what happened to the Jews in the ancient world was they would come to a place, make the place really prosperous, and then when they got super, super rich, they'd be expelled and their gold would be taken. And this happened, if you read Shama and I'm very interested in ancient history. That's how I wrote my Sappho book and stuff. Everything that happened in the Nazi Holocaust happened in the ancient world. In other words, Jews would come to a place, they would make it prosperous. When they got rich, people would take their money and drive them out. So there are now geneticists who are wondering, do our genes bear the imprint of all our ancestors' troubles?
And are we doomed to repeat it again and again?
I don't know. But I read in one of the Jewish newspapers, the foreword, that there are geneticists looking into are Jews marked by all the troubles we've lived through. Now, I don't know the answer to that.
But designer clothes are a buffer
against the Holocaust.
Really? What? And shoes.
Right.
Shoes really help, don't they?
They do really help.
Whether you've gained 5 or lost 5.
Right, exactly.
There's always a nice shoe.
Always. And there's always a nice shoe. And you go, I can't wear spikes anymore.
No.
Can you?
I never could. I'm so clumsy.
I can't wear them. But the square heels I like a lot. And these things, the one...
Oh, nice. I like those.
You know, those are for people whose feet can't get into... I gave all of the stilts to one of my assistants.
Lucky girl. She was. Yes.
But my granddaughter, Beth, says, I'm not going to let my feet grow because Grandma has the greatest shoes. So
she's, yeah.
There are some left.
Good for her. And your bonus item, number 6?
My daughter Molly reminds me I will never really be the boss. The other day I said to my husband, I said, I miss my mother. He said, she's here in the shape of your daughter.
Is that right?
Molly is a critic. Molly is, she is everything my mother was, but worse. Molly is a Leo, born on Bill Clinton's birthday, August 19th. She is the boss of everything and everyone. And, but, you know, she says, Mommy, you have to sell that house in Connecticut. For God's sake, you've had it 40 years. I say, Molly, I've written 12 books in that house. So what?
Wow, she's
Get
tough.
rid of it.
Yeah.
And she's really tough, but she's really sweet.
And she's
so brilliant.
She's brilliant. I agree. And so are you. Erica, thank you so much. It's really
fun to talk to you.
Really fun to talk to you. You've been listening to 5 Things That Make Life Better with your host, Lisa Birnbach. My guest this week has been Erica Jong, author of the new book of poetry, The World Began With Yes. Her latest novel is Fear of Dying. Read it. It's fantastic. You can follow Erica on Twitter at Erica Jong, or her website is ericajong.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, YouTube, and iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. My blog is at lisabirnbach.com, where you'll find links and photos about all the things we spoke about here today. This podcast is produced in New York City by thefieldtv.com. My engineer is Jimmy Regan. My team is Spressa Arucci, Michael Port, and Sam Haft. Until next week, stay cool and act natural. Bye-bye.
That was 5 Things with Lisa Birnbach. New episodes every Friday, if she remembers.